The Air Force sent its chief scientific consultant on UFOs, Professor J. Allen Hynek, to check the Michigan sighting. Dr. Hynek agreed that the good citizens of Michigan had seen something in the marshland. He thought they had seen marsh gas.
I've had many letters pointing out that they, as children on the farm, had many experiences with swamp life, and that this was obviously the thing it was, and they couldn't understand why the people in Michigan got so excited over swamp life. And the illusion of motion, frequently, is given by the fact that a little bit of swamp light appears here, it goes out, another one appears over here, that goes out there, and the illusion, as viewed from a distance, is that the object is moved back and forth. And sometimes the gas will gather into a ball and actually float away.
The United States Air Force, in discharging its responsibility for the aerospace defense of the nation, is called upon to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects. Two Air Force officers have, over the years, been very closely associated with this activity. Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Tacker was formerly the chief spokesman for the Air Force on the matter, and Major Hector Quintanilla is now the chief of Project Lucas. Major Quintanilla, what are the objectives of Project Lucas?
The objectives of the program are twofold. They're the same as they have been since 1953 when the regulations were written. First of all, to try to determine if the UFO phenomena presents a threat to the security of the United States. And second, to determine if the UFO phenomena exhibits any technological advances which could be turned into solutions to the government.
What's the record so far?
Today, we have over 10,000 cases of flight Patio airplanes, of which 646 of these are newly identified. That's not to say that we could not have identified more cases if we had gotten to the observer quickly and checked the open activity.
The Air Force has been accused from time to time of hiding information about UFOs. What do you have to say to that, Colonel?
These charges are absolutely untrue. Actually, the United States Air Force releases statistics on the UFO phenomena through the Department of Defense press desk periodically, and we've always honored accredited media when they want to investigate a given specific sighting.
There's nothing to hide.
There's nothing to hide at all.
Is there anything in the file, either classified or unclassified, that would indicate that there may be extraterrestrial visitors over here?
First of all, the project is completely unclassified. And there's nothing in the records that could indicate that we have been visited by any advanced civilization.
How does the Air Force look upon people who make reports of UFOs? Do they look on them as qualified observers?
Yes, they do look on them as qualified observers. Actually, most people who report a UFO sighting are patriotic citizens who have been mystified by something that they've seen, and through a patriotic sense, report it to the local law enforcement officials or to the United States Air Force base near them.
What would you consider as a person qualified to interpret what he sees?
Well, I consider astronomers genuinely experts in their field. First of all, they have a tremendous advantage over the other physical scientists, and that is that they have powerful telescopes and photographic equipment to confirm their existence.
Do astronomical laboratories make any contribution to UFO study?
In a negative way, they do, because I've never received a UFO report from the observer.
Not a one.
Not a single.
Well, how about the tracking and detection facilities that the Air Force itself has? How does this fit?
Well, actually, to begin with, the United States Air Force is charged by an act of Congress with the Air Defense of the United States. And the North American Air Defense Command and the Air Defense Command have space tracking facilities which are constantly on the alert 24 hours a day. We're interested in anything that flies in our atmosphere.
Well, how about UFO reports in other countries? How are they?
The UFOs actually occur worldwide. However, the United States is the only country in the world places with much emphasis on the phenomenon. Other countries place a burden of scrutiny on the observer, and not on the Earth.
That would make your job a lot easier if they did that.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Colonel Packer, Major Quintanilla. I would like to close by reading a very brief excerpt from the report of the Air Force's Scientific Advisory Board, which they made recently upon completing a detailed review of the subject of UFO. This is the statement. The committee concluded that in the 19 years since the first UFO was sighted, there has been no evidence that unidentified flying objects are a threat to our national security.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States. Is that? We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any department of the United States. We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
Watch me for the signal here, sir, to start.
I'll start when you throw it down.
Hold it, boys. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
Major Keyhole, as author of the book Flying Saucers Are Real, what is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin. During a 3-year investigation, I found that many pilots have described objects of substance and high speed. One case, pilots reported their plane was buffeted by an object which passed them at 500 miles an hour. Obviously, this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space.
Hello there. Welcome back to Paranormal Patio. As always, it's me, Jason. I'm the one. You knew that before you clicked the video. You knew what you were getting your hands on. All this super sweet dark paisley shirt that was worn to the premiere of season 2 of Pennyroyal in Somerset, Kentucky. I bought this for Nathan Isaac alone, but I decided to bust it out of the closet tonight so I could look fancy, So, start things off, I want to apologize for my voice and for just totally smacking the camera. I am getting over being sick. It has been a week-long affair, nearly. Combine that with a guest falling off and a little homework that I was doing, work on my own, and some research that I've been doing. So far this year, I have read 2 vintage UFO books, and I'm going to try to read at least one a month. If I can read 15 this year, that would be awesome. You could say it would be stellar, right? So I've been busy. On top of that, the proverbial cat was let out of the bag a little bit. If you are a Patreon member of the Pennyroyal podcast, and you're a member of the Liminal Lodge, you may have caught a minor throwaway line from Nathan Isaac that he and I are working on an upcoming project together. And I'm not going to say anything beyond that, but I've been doing a lot of research for that. We have this crazy murder board going on with pictures and quotes and people and places and proverbial red yarn, go into all of them, and it's going to be a good time. Definitely learning a lot of things I was not completely aware of, and tying things together that I haven't in a way that I am now. So that's very exciting, and I do have a lot going on. On top of that, I have decided to run for public office locally here in my little village. So I'm looking forward to the election coming up soon. And yeah, I've just been really super, super busy. But I do have some guests lined up for the next episodes. And since I've gotten kind of behind here about 2 weeks or so, I decided to go ahead and do a mid-season break. So if you're a fan of my show, expect new episodes in March. And we'll finish out season 4. And hopefully not long after that, this new project will be officially announced and rocking and rolling before summer. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. Hopefully it will. I'm looking forward to where it goes, for sure. I think combining the efforts of myself and Nathan Isaac will be a wonderful treat for weirdos like you. Thank you for showing up and for being here. If you are new to one of the Paranormal Patio podcast live streams, this is kind of what you get. And normally I would have a guest on, or I would have a big thing to do. I'm thinking about talking to our good friend Adam Towla about doing a live stream paint along where we paint a picture together, and I think that'd be a lot of fun. Something paranormal themed, maybe a Mothman or a UFO or something. But speaking of UFOs, and I've mentioned already that I've been reading these books, I just finished Uninvited Visitors, A Biologist Looks at UFOs by Ivan T. Sanderson. If the name sounds familiar, congratulations, you're in a niche. Ivan Sanderson, I would say most notable for being conned at one point into admitting that he believed there was a giant penguin on the loose in Florida based on quote unquote evidence of giant tracks that matched a penguin's foot, but on a much larger scale, and professed that it was what was going on. And the guy comes out and says, hey, I made these. I've been making them for X amount of days or months or weeks, whatever it was. And so everybody just jumped on the ridicule Sanderson bandwagon. However, this book was very, very good. And if you can find one, I recommend picking it up and reading it. There are a few that are available online. There may be reprints, republishments. This is 1967. This is actually a first edition. And the coolest thing about this book, I'll take the dust jacket off and show you, is that it has this giant hologram like on the front. You can't really tell. It's one of these little lenticular things. It's a UFO and some power lines. I thought it was really awesome. And then the dust jacket has a cutout hole, so you just see, like the center of it, which I thought was a really nice touch back when they made books good. You know what I mean? They don't do them like that anymore, unfortunately. So my goal with reading these UFO books, these vintage UFO books, is that I like to find a mention of another author, researcher, or explicitly a book within the book I'm reading to read from next. And I found Ivan Sanderson's book here after reading John Keel's Flying Saucer to the Center of Your Mind, which is actually a collection of different articles and excerpts that Keel had written. It's mentioned in Hellier for the tin can UFO sighting thing in Wisconsin. And it's very brief, it's just a throwaway line in Hellier, but it is a really good book and a good summation of Keel's work. And if you've never read Keel before, I would recommend it right up there with Mothman Prophecies for sure. And Eighth Tower, which is basically Mothman Prophecies extra, I guess would be a good way to describe that. So the next book that I have coming is a book that I already knew about. And it is going to be Flying Saucers and the Three Men, sort of the Albert Bender Men in Black thing by Gray Barker. Not mentioned in this book, but while I was researching some things in this book, I watched a documentary about the Men in Black. And the Men in Black documentary I was watching, I don't even remember what it was called. It wasn't the Men in Black movie. I know what you're thinking. And which is also great, but totally unrelated. The third one was just, I can't even put it into words. It was brilliant. Anyway, so this documentary mentions the Albert Bender story, and I wanted to dig into that a little bit more. Actually, a few weeks before I watched it, I had emailed and had a short conversation with Alan Greenfield about Bender because I was curious about it, and I was already leaning into it. So I guess it's just fate, one of those things that just lined up, perfectly. And so I decided to go ahead and read that book next. After that, we'll just see where it goes. I might pick something up there from Barker in his work. But one of the things that I really wanted to do tonight, besides talk about all of this stuff and, just hang out, chill out, talk about Paranormal Patio, is I'm going to present a brief slideshow that I have thrown together from information on the research in Uninvited Visitors. And also we're going to look at Trevor James Constable. And I was made aware of Trevor James months and months ago. He believed, I think he may be past, that some UFOs are actually living creatures that are normally invisible to us, that live in the upper atmosphere of our planet. And it sounds outlandish, and it absolutely probably is, but it's still a fascinating take because this book talks about UFOs in a lot of different ways. And I wanted to talk about Trevor James a little bit because he is mentioned a few times in Uninvited Visitors. And we can do that right now. It would be, absolutely nothing. In his book, Sky Creatures, which I will bring up an excerpt for here. There's this little article that he rips from a man named Mead Lane, who founded, or presently at the time was running, the Borderland Science Research Association in San Diego. So it's 1946. But this little nugget here is something that I want people to think about. I mean, UFOs are very topical right now in the mainstream news. So, and they're always topical for me. But this little clip is just fantastic. The aeroforms are thought constructs, mind constructs. As such, they are, in effect, the vehicle of the actual entity who creates them. Just as our own terrestrial minds rule and become identified with our bodies, so does the entity of the etheric world make for himself a body or vehicle out of etheric substance. The body may be of any shape or size, any one of 100 mutants, such as the indefinite and changing shapes reported by observers of flying saucers throughout the world. The shapes may be a wheel, a globe, a fusiform or cigar shape, a fireball, vapor or gases. It may have any density, any rate of vibration desired. The impenetrable steel of landed discs is, as it were, a sort of etheric isotope of our terrestrial steel, or we may call it etheric steel. The shapes and vehicles and the entity operating them from one being, just as a human being is a psychophysical mind-body unit, the body of this Etherean entity is a thought form which can go anywhere and penetrates our earth and sea as easily as our air. And that is from the Ether Ship Mystery, as I mentioned, from Borderland Science Research and Mead Lane. So there's a lot to unpack in that little article that I find pertinent to a lot of other areas of paranormal study. You start to talk about different types of beings, different types of bodies. The etheric is mentioned here in this case. I started to learn about the sort of Oversoul 7 and the different planes of existence to our reality from the Seth material. And sort of being able to project yourself, your own consciousness into these different bodies that already exist. And the higher up that you go, the more liberties you can take with how you project the physical representation of yourself, of your soul. And the etheric is one of those. The astral is one of. You ever hear anybody talk about having an out-of-body experience or astral projecting? I've talked about astral projection a lot on my show. That is another level. So you think of it like that, and I thought that was a really interesting thing to think about UFOs in that way. And another thing that it made me think of when he mentions the landed discs as an interpretation of Earth steel, it made me think about Bob Lazar's story. Now, you could say whatever you want about Bob Lazar. I don't even know if I believe the Bob Lazar story, but it's still really interesting to me. And Bob Lazar mentions that the U.S. government has, several different types of recovered craft that he, believes are extraterrestrial, and that they're all pretty well solid, but it's 3D printed. And this was long before 3D printing existed. So to me, if you were to copy an airplane, for example, in the astral plane, this is so woo-woo, out loud. In my head, it makes perfect sense. If you were to copy an airplane, you wouldn't necessarily copy all of the parts of the airplane separately. You wouldn't need to make the seats and make the floorboards and make the bolts and the nuts to connect the two together. It would just be one thing. And that's exactly what they're talking about with the landed discs. And I thought that was a really just astonishing connection when you consider that was in 1946, which is way before Bob Lazar's story and before astral projection had become the new age sort of experimentation that it became. And I thought it was great. I was like, that's really fascinating. This is sort of two different people from two different walks of life that are explaining the same things and how things work. And I thought that was great. Another thing that I found from Mr. Trevor James Constable is some pictures from the book Sky Creatures, which we had already briefly discussed. And the pictures that I found, I'm actually going to remove at in this discussion. Did I lose my sound? Am I back? I might have lost all of the sound. I apologize. I took myself out so that I could narrate these pictures, and then I didn't narrate anything. I apologize. Didn't think about that. Like I mentioned, I'm still getting over being sick. Okay, give me a break here. Basically, I was just talking about the pictures and describing the comments below. You didn't really miss a whole lot if you were able to read any of that strong mouth shaking. Well, it was you know, I was emphasizing the words that I was saying that you didn't hear. No, it wasn't anyone's phone, just me being dumb. Which, you know, you probably missed on absolutely nothing. You can check this out if you want to join the Patreon. If you're not presently a Patreon member for the Paranormal Patio podcast, you can go to patreon.com/beyondthepatio, get signed up, and I have a secret library. And a little bird told me that Sky Creatures by Trevor James Constable was going to be added in the February section of said secret library, and you can come and read it for yourself, and you can narrate the pictures on your own, and you can shake your mouse as much as you want. So, hey, why not? Shake it. Shake it. So, that being said, I want to talk about the Ivan T. Sanderson Uninvited Visitors classification system that he has come up with. I mentioned he is a biologist. So he decided that if we're going to be talking about UFOs or UAOs, as he describes them in Uninvited Visitors, and maybe some of his other work as well, that you need a classification system to do that and to look at different explanations for different things involving UFO sightings. I thought this was a great idea, and it's not something I'd seen anyone else do, even now. So that comes with him being a biologist, I think. So let's take a look here. This is Ivan Sanderson. He was born January 30th, 1911, died February 19th, 1973. British biologist and writer from Edinburgh, Scotland, became a U.S. citizen, and he was a founding figure in cryptozoology. He authored material on paranormal subjects and wrote fiction under the pen name Terrence Roberts. Yeah, I think he wrote 3 fictional works as Terrence Roberts. Yes, a handsome fellow. He kind of looks like Walt Disney and Howard Stark, I think. Outline of UFO and UAO hypothesis. What could UAOs be? What do they do? Where could they come from? Because of its complexity, the evidence is best presented in an orderly classification. So, what could they be? They could be inanimate, and they could be naturally inanimate. They could be non-material, energy packets, as in bolides, which would be meteors that completely disintegrate in our atmosphere. They could be non-solid. They could be gaseous, as in clouds. They could be solid, like meteorites, which are the fragments of bolides or meteors that survive and penetrate the atmosphere and land on the planet. They could be artificially inanimate, self-contained items like satellites. They could be transports, freighters, or plane-carrying planes. They could be auxiliary manned devices like planes, or robotic auxiliary devices like probes or drones. I added the drones bit in. Drones were not a thing in 1967. So there you go. Missiles like bullets and ICBMs. They could also be animate. And as animate objects, they could be naturally animate. They could be life forms indigenous to space or indigenous to atmospheres, like we talked about with Trevor James and the Sky Critters, Well, I talked, but no one heard me talk about it, apparently. Life forms indigenous to solid bodies, planets, planetoids, meteors. They could be artificially animate. They could be domesticated natural life forms, genetically created life forms, or biochemically created life forms. What forms could they take? Actually, let's go back here because I want to also talk about a theory that I subscribe to presently, and my theories are always ever changing, but not only could they be naturally occurring or artificially occurring, they could also be some sort of dimensional slip or time travel artifact or a manifestation artifact that is presented to us for a myriad of different reasons. And I think that UFOs are not nuts and bolts, not flesh and blood creatures like the sky critters, but it's the phenomenon at large. Everything that I consider paranormal is a facet of the phenomenon, the field, the other. And UFOs are one way that it's represented to us based on a million different pieces of the recipe. Your body chemistry, your mental state, the geology of the area that you're in, the geography of the area that you're in, what you had to eat that day. Maybe you've only spoken 3 words that day. Maybe you've spoken a million. There could be a huge list of things that could contribute to the phenomenon presenting itself to you in a way that you can detect it, you can get some sort of meaning out of it. And I think that goes for ghosts a lot of times. I think it goes for UFOs a lot of times. I think it goes for, Sasquatch and other alien creatures, the Mothman. A lot of these things are manifestations, dogmen. I could go on and on, the Fae, whatever. So this is something that Sanderson would not have included as a biologist, especially in 1967. These would have had him hung from the proverbial rafters via a strong rope he's already woo-woo for now. He really would have been woo-woo in 67, and it would have been just beyond comprehension to include metaphysical aspects of UFOs at that time. What forms could they take? They could be amorphous, completely without specific shape, and implying that no two are alike at any time, and that they have the ability to change shape, as in amoebas, which relates again to Trevor James Constable's sky critters. They could be patterned or manufactured. Non-symmetrical, you could be curved, subangular, angular. They could be symmetrical, curved, subangular, and angular. So, you could have rounded junctions or angled junctions. So it could be a sphere or a star, or it could be a wonky trapezoid, or maybe spherical on half and pyramidal on one half. A lot of different combinations. What could they be made of? They could be made of non-material. They could be completely composed of, he calls them force fields. Energy, swamp gas, definitely swamp gas. They could be made of materials that we know. It could be gaseous, liquid, and colloidal, solid, and of that could be organic, could be inorganic, metallic, inorganic, non-metallic, ice, glass, ceramic. It could be a combination of all of those. It could be a material in forms that are not known to us, contra and or antimatter, which is interesting. Possibility of other space-time continua or universes, and I would also argue time. I would also argue realities. Again, things that he would not have included and probably didn't believe as a biologist. What do they do? Here's things that UFOs might do. They might appear. They could do that through materialization. They could appear instantly or by degrees or from a distance. They can stabilize. They can remain static in size, form, position, etc. And they could dematerialize as well. They could instantly dematerialize, or they could phase out, or they could fly away. So that's something that UFOs do. They appear. Also, they move. So they can move in situ of themselves by gyration, pulsation, or changing shape. They can move within limits, like a falling leaf, which is described a lot in Flying Saucer to the Center of Your Mind by John Keel. It seemed that in the 60s and 70s, a lot of these UFOs had a sort of falling leaf movement to them, which, incidentally enough, when I saw a ghost cat in high school in my, at the time, girlfriend's bathroom while I was pooping, TMI, probably, from the corner of my eye, I saw what looked like a sheet of white paper falling from about 5 feet. And when it hit the ground, it was a little white kitten that ran into the wall and disappeared. So I thought it was interesting to see the falling leaf description of movement for UFOs come up. They can move in progression. They can travel curvaceously or by angular turns and complete instant reversals from instant starts and with instant stops, which would imply mechanical control. There's a lot of discussion that UFOs seem to move on straight lines. It could be in a grid pattern. It could be along ley lines. It could be Josh Cutchin's theory of, like, I don't remember exactly what he calls it, the ghost roads or spirit roads or fairy roads. Look into Josh Cutchin's work for sure. They can move via land. They can move on subaerial surfaces, which would include low-level hovers or on gear of some sort. They can land in water, on surface, or in suspension. Or they could land on subaqueous surfaces below the water, sea and ocean bottoms. What do? They can emit. They can emit noises, be it vibratory, intermittent, or or just patterns or non-patterns. They can emit chemi-effluents, metallic, aromatic, or other sulfurous, for example. So a chemi-effluent that is mentioned in Flying Saucer to the Center of Your Mind is a silicon remnants that were found a lot in the 70s flaps. They can emit radiation, just general overall radioactivity, electromagnetic EMI, electromagnetic interference effects, etc., which would be like the classic stories of a UFO chasing a car, and the radio goes out, the lights go out, the engine dies, which would be like an EMP pulse. They can radiate light, either reflected, luminosity, or beamed. They can radiate heat and possibly other or mental. Maybe they can emanate some sort of mental radiation, some sort of ESP that you pick up on. They also ingest. They could be ingesting energy, magnetic energy, electrical energy. The cover of the book I showed you has the hologram of the UFO over the power lines. This was also very common for UFO sightings in the 70s. And again, I can see the hologram there of the UFO on the power lines. Very common to see that. And those early flaps, I haven't come across it as often here. Good friend John Hosier, former co-host of the show, good friend John, saw a UFO over the power lines in the fields behind his house a few years back. And we went and checked it out and didn't find any evidence of anything. They can also ingest matter, gaseous, especially the inert gases in the air. They can ingest liquids, water, gasoline, I guess. Solids, minerals, or other raw materials. Maybe they're coming and beaming up diamonds or jade or something. They can ingest life forms. They can suck people up, cows, plants. A lot of stories about UFOs coming down during Bigfoot occurrences, and the Bigfoot's either holding a ball of light or becoming a ball of light and going up into a UFO. You can see Stan Gordon for some of those stories. What could the occupants be? This is briefly mentioned in the book. Usually, it's mostly about UFOs. It does mention the occupants, the pilots, the little guys inside there. They could be non-corporeal. They could be intrinsic entities. They could just be thought patterns or energy packets. They could be non-corporeal simulacra, which would be reflections, as in mirages, or projections, as in films, TV, etc. I would also argue they could be projections from consciousnesses, like we talked about with etheric and astral and so forth. They could be corporeal, and they could be artificial life forms or natural life forms, or they could be robots, self-controlled, remote-controlled. I would also argue they could be both. You could have a non-corporeal, remote-controlled entity. How about that? Give you that to chew on. How could these be organized? This was interesting. They can be organized structurally. They could be rigid, crystalline, as in some viruses in some phases. They could be amorphous. They could also be structurally structured. External skeleton, as in arthropods. Internal skeleton, as in vertebrates, or with no skeleton at all. They could be made of fluid, whether encapsulated, like a single cell organism has, like the barrier, right? Protozoa. Or it could be without any integument, any skin, any barrier whatsoever. It could just literally be liquid. They could also be organized corporately. We can talk about these pilots of these UFOs. They could be single units. They could be colonies. They could be hegemonies, like the Portuguese man of war, which is like a little collection of jellyfish that sort of act as one entity out there in the oceans. They could also just be composite organisms like ourselves and other animals. The idea of single-celled organisms piloting UFOs astounds me, but as a biologist, as Sanderson was, I suppose he had to look at that as a possibility, and really we don't know. I mean, it could be absolutely true. They could also be organized functionally, like why are they here? Or like what function is it that they are here? Could they be static, like bacteria and radio transmitters? Could they be sessile, like plants and sea anemones, which are living things that aren't necessarily on the move by their own will? Or they could be mobile, like ourselves and other animals. Well, where could they be from, Jason? Well, Mr. Sanderson has some possibilities, and I will expound upon them. They could be from other universes. If you look at the possibility of multiple universes, which is, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but out of the way thinking in 1967. They could be from our universe. They could be intergalactic, cross galaxies in space, rogue bodies in space. They could just live in space. They could be from other galaxies alone. They could be from our galaxy, but outside of our solar system. Interstellar space, non-solid bodies, such as stars or suns or gaseous nebulae. Or they could be from solid bodies like planets, planetoids, moons, other satellites, dead stars. They could be from our own solar system, but outside of Earth. They could just be floating around in space. They could be, riding around on comets or the sun, major planets, Earth-like planets, which would include Venus, Earth, and Mars. Mini planets like Mercury and Pluto, planetoids, asteroids, planetary satellites, which would be like moons, or our own moon, as original source, not as a way station. They could be from here. They could be from the space between Earth and the moon. They could be from the upper atmosphere, like the sky critters of Trevor James. They could be from the land surface, under the Antarctic ice or in caves or under or in the sea. And they could be from the future or the past or from another, I don't want to say a dimension. They could be transdimensional. They could be from another reality that exists independently of our own. Somebody said that the thought of UFOs ingesting things gives me anxiety. Yeah, it gives me a little anxiety. And someone also said the sea is horrified. Dude, the sea is horrified. It is. It really is. How could these UFOs get here? No, they could already be here. They could have been here a long time before us, or they could be here right now and we can't see them, which is, a possibility. Or they could be from elsewhere. They could be from elsewhere inadvertently, accidentally. They physically drift in, or there's a collision, or they're captured, or whatever. Or they could be here inadvertently, temporally, dropping through from other space-time continua, like a transdimensional thing, for sure. Accidentally, just oops, drop down too low in the vibration state there. They could be from elsewhere deliberately, be it physically, by a reaction or other drives, so like an engine. Or they could be here deliberately, temporally, by instant transference, or as Mr. Sanderson refers to it multiple times in the book, ITF, or other energy drives. Why do they come here? Well, it could just be for reasons we will never understand, or as so eloquently put in the book, for reasons beyond our ken. They could also be here for reasons that are understandable to us, right? Unintentionally, by mistake, they stumbled across this or they're lost. They could be here under duress, mechanically or otherwise in distress, or seeking a haven or asylum. Maybe they're at war with one another and they have to get out of there. They could be here for reasons understandable to us intentionally. They could be here on scientific missions, exploring, investigating, collecting, experimenting, breeding. They could be here militaristically. They could be doing reconnaissance. They can be on strategic missions, establishing bases. They could be here tactically, in different stages of warfare, or they could be on patrol. They could be here on political assignment. They could be here to occupy us through annexation or colonization. They could be surveilling us, policing of property. Maybe they own us and we don't know it, and they're just here keeping an eye on us. Or maybe they are incarcerated here. Maybe this planet is, a penal colony, like Australia started out being. They could be here commercially. They could be here to exploit us or our resources. They could be here farming, of different life forms, plants, animals, humans. They could be here to trade, either with us or with other, entities from wherever they come from. Maybe they're here for tourism, and I would definitely demand a refund if that were the case, I think. So that was the little presentation there that I cooked up from Uninvited Visitors, which I highly recommend reading. If I can possibly add it to the Patreon exclusive library, I will do so. Otherwise, pick it up on eBay, or maybe you can find it on Amazon if you are into that, or wherever you might buy used books from. If you see Ivan T. Sanderson, there's a few UFO type books that are, related to this. I'm going to pop through the comments here, get caught up. Adam Towel of the Paranormal Polynesian says hi. Hope you're doing well, Adam, because he hopes everyone else is doing well with his fancy cowboy hat emoji there. I heard him on Vincent's podcast recently. It was really good. I assume that this was in reference to Joshua Cutchin, and if not the long dead Ivan T. Sanderson. Although Vincent Trewell might have the ghost of Ivan T. Sanderson on the show, which I would love. I like some of the things that you said. are some of the exact reasons they could not be here, specifically the political or commercial. I think, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that these are all the reasons that they are here. This is the classification system that Ivan T. Sanderson cooked up, thinking of every possibility at the time that he could think of. And that might have changed after, publication of this book. He lived for a few more years. He could have come up with even more, why they're here, what they are, where they come from. And again, this is from the perspective of a biologist in 1967. And he was still trying to remain credible in his field, not just in the woo-woo field. So for sure would come with headaches and handcuffs and things that you just can't say, unfortunately. So, guys, that's really all that I have prepared for this evening. Let's see, you guys want to ask any questions or make any comments or whatever, I will be on the comments here. If I'm an advanced life form doing light speed travel and I show up this shithole using coal and whatnot, I would bail. No, yeah, for sure. Again, that implies that extraterrestrials pilot the UFOs and that the UFOs themselves are extraterrestrial. And I think that's definitely a possibility. I don't think that every UFO is an alien in the sense that it is piloted by a creature from somewhere in our reality that has traveled here just because of the logistics of time travel, space-time travel. If you're using wormholes and generating black holes for travel, there's a lot to consider. The movement of planets and so forth, and the speed of that movement and relativity. If you're just traveling here on a rocket, from outside of our solar system, it almost has to be, that is, you find a target, you plan for the travel, you complete the travel over a time frame of several years. I mean, even if you're at light speed, right? Light speed is the measurement that it takes light to travel, right? So a light year is how far light will travel in 1 year. And we, like, the closest star from us is 4.1 light years away. You calculate the speed of light times 4.1. Yeah, and I realize that's based with the technology that we have. You could go faster than the speed of light, and then again, you're dealing with time travel as well. I don't think it's likely, but I don't think it's impossible that someone from somewhere else would find us and say, let's go poke around and see. It seems unlikely to me. However, if you think of our reality existing on a layer of an onion, maybe we're the fourth or fifth layer. This onion's got 15 layers, and each layer has its own reality, right? If you're able to travel through the layers in the same place of the onion, like sticking a nail through the onion and using it as a road, then going to a different layer in the same space seems to be more likely to me. I have an easier time with that. Or a parfait. Everybody loves a parfait. They do. As a fun story that's not related to any of this, but funny, in junior high Scholastic Bowl, I was not known to be an excellent speller. And I was told by my teammates and coaches that if a spelling toss-up question were to arise in a Scholastic Bowl meet, I should be the person after the last person to buzz in with an answer. However, one particular day, there was a question about the Peanut Buster Parfait from Dairy Queen and how to spell it. And I buzzed in and I audibly heard my coach sigh and shook his head. It's like, there's no way he's going to spell parfait right. Like, if I can answer anything else, I have the green light. Spelling, no, you're done. So I blew their minds because I spelled parfait right in 7th grade, but that was the expectations they had on me. The only reason that I did know how to spell parfait correctly was because the peanut butter parfait was my favorite item from Dairy Queen at the time. And I ate a bunch of them because I'm also fat. And I was even, fat thin. So I nailed it and everybody cheered because I got it right, which was just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Love that I can just break Jason's train of thought with my nonsense. Yeah, whoever you are, mystery person, thank you for breaking my train of thought. So, yeah, so I got that. I nailed it. And then I got the green light, and I think that was the only one I attempted. Now you know. Yeah, but to me, looking at it like that, like transrealistic. I don't know the way I would describe it, but that seems more likely to me that these things exist on another plane of existence, another reality, so to speak, a parallel reality, if that's how you want to word it, and they bleed through or they purposely come through. And that's a possibility for sure. And it might be what the other is. That might be what this other phenomena and the UFOs and the dog people and the Bigfoot and the goblins and the ghosts, that could just be another reality blending in. And I do think it's possible that actual aliens are doing this too. You come in here. Sure, it's possible. I just don't think it's likely, especially for every single situation, every single case that's come up in the last 100 years alone. And before that, you can go way, way back to stories and pictographs and hieroglyphics depicting things, these UFOs, these sky people. So, and to elaborate on that further with ghosts, do I think it's possible that the spirits of the formerly living come back and communicate with us, or that we see them? Or do I only think that is a manifestation from the field based on our memories of people? If it were only people that you knew, if the only ghosts that were ever seen resembled people from the observer's memory, I would say without a doubt, those are manifestations from the field. Those are not the spirits of the dead. But as someone who has seen ghosts and heard ghosts that had unfamiliar features, unfamiliar voices, that's not pulling from my memory. That is possibly a spirit of the dead. And I think both things can be true. One of my favorite authors on past life regression, past lives, was Michael Newton. He wrote the Life Between Lives series. He was a hypnotist and stumbled upon a past life with someone once, and then it became fascinating to him, and he started studying it in much further depth. And that is something that is mentioned a few times in the case studies that he presents in the books, how often people that die just move on to the next phase. Like, it's over. Good job. The TV show's over. Turn the TV off and pick up the book or whatever. But sometimes they feel that they have to communicate with those that they leave behind. And it does happen. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does happen. And in that state where your soul, your spirit, your ghost, whatever, has left its body and is able to interact with the physical world it left behind, time works differently. It may be a lot slower. It may be a lot faster, which would explain why sometimes you see the ghost of someone who has passed away seconds after they've passed away. Sometimes you see the ghost of someone years after they've passed away, but to them, it's instantaneously because time moves differently. There is no time. We've made time to exist in our reality, our living, waking reality, to make things easier for us. And that's something that happens according to Michael Newton and the people that he had under hypnosis and the case studies that he presents in the books, Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls, the Life Between Lives series. All excellent books, one of which is available right now on Patreon, patreon.com/Beyond the Patio in the secret library. Yeah, so all of these things could be happening from every angle together. UFOs could be from Sirius, or they could be from our minds, or they could be us in the future. It could be all of those. All of those could be the truth at once. And I like to look at all the stuff that we weirdos are into in the paranormal as not always being the same source. Even though I think most of the time it is the exact same source, it doesn't mean that every time it is. If any of that was coherent, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, if there's any questions or anything that anyone wants me to talk about or anything like that, I'll give you guys a few minutes to hit the chat up. And yeah, otherwise, I will bid everyone adieu shortly. There is also a delay here. If anyone's coming in late, the announcements that I made are the show is on a mid-season break, and we'll be back in March. And what else? Nathan Isaac and I are working on a secret project. It's going to be great. I think, and I'm running for office. What office am I running for? I am running for village trustee. That's right, village trustee, at the behest of the current administration, which is really a small time thing, but interesting to me to be involved in the decision making of a community, in my own community, and being responsible for those decisions and how they affect not only myself but the entire community would be great. I live in a really small community. I believe the current population is like 106. There are 6 trustees, a mayor, and a secretary. So as a voting member of the village board, there would be a responsibility for 98 souls. Current administration, aliens wanting to get you under their thumb. It's very possible. It's completely possible. As an aside, I live in said village. My studio is independent of my home, and I was running in the house actually to grab this wonderful shirt a little bit before the live stream started, and I opened my door, went outside, closed the door behind me, and I heard someone walking through the gravel to the east of my studio, the drive beside my property that goes to another property back in a holler. And I looked and did not see anything or anyone. My first thought was it's probably a deer. If you follow me on social media, I shared a video. I came home from work the other morning and there were like 4 deer in my yard. That was fun. But I would have heard it run away and seen it. But it was something large that was like moving larger rocks back here. And I don't know, I got the heebie-jeebies a little bit, not gonna lie. But I didn't see anything or hear anything after that. There is that many officials in your town. I wouldn't have guessed. Yeah, there are. It is to represent a fair vote amongst the different age groups, social classes, Political classes make up the community, and there are 6 trustees. If a tie comes from a vote, then the mayor will be the deciding factor. Otherwise, the mayor does not vote in matters, only enforces and carries them out. Yeah. Rule wisely. Always. That's what I do. I rule wisely, but firmly and justly. And it's funny, the level of fascination with this to me. Several people that I talk to online that have known about this for a little bit are fascinated by it. The fact that it is a thing that exists, and that I may or may not be a part of it. It's fascinating. It's a much bigger deal, I feel like, to people outside of the situation. There's a monthly meeting, unless there's something that comes up. No, you weren't in the loop. This is the public announcement, and I have not spoken to you in a while, and we need to remedy that. If you are Matthew Bird, and I think you are, because evidence exists. For sure, I miss my Matthew, for sure. Yeah, guys, this has been great. Thank you for coming on and hanging out. And if you're watching this not live, coincidentally enough, was the name of my first podcast, Not Live from the Patio. Weird. Don't look it up. It's horrible. Thank you for dropping in. If this is your first time and you like what you see, come hang out with us on Patreon. And if you're here because you already are on the Patreon, thank you so much for being here. And I love all you guys. Stay weird. Find anything weird, let me know about it. Love to hear about it. And I will see you all in the future, which could be the present. It could be the past. Maybe it's all 3. Take care, everybody. Good night. Have a good, safe weekend.